Today I'm welcoming to the channel a special guest. She's a producer. She's also a writer. Her name is Betsy Chasse.
That's
Hi.
right. Hi, you got it.
Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Maybe just give us a little background data on you, just a little bit of, info that we kind of get a sense of who you are and where you came from and all that.
Sure. So I am a filmmaker. I'm a writer. I'm a mom. I'm a, curious human trying to figure out what the hell is going on in this reality. I'm not sure I'll ever figure it out. I ask a lot of interesting people that question and get a lot of really cool answers that I create into films. I'm most known for the film What the Bleep Do We Know? But I've done films like Song of the New Earth, Pregnant in America. I just did a whole docuseries on energy healing. I'm in post-production on a really cool new docuseries called the Galileo Project, which travels all around the world interviewing scientists and just scientists mostly that, if you know Galileo's story, he spent the last 8 years of his life under house arrest because he said the earth was not the center of the universe. And he really upset the church. And so in our own way, luckily these days we're not literally burning, heretics at the stake. But we are certainly sidelining them and making it difficult for their research to come out into the world. And so that's what the Galileo Project is about. It's about exploring cool science that's very legitimate, that could really transform and shift the way we exist in this reality.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, that's super fascinating to me. The idea that in the past, people like Galileo, people like Copernicus, people like Socrates, Christ, like they paid the ultimate sacrifice to follow truth and to not speak falsely. And it's just
Sorry,
such a
my dog is very
fascinating.
excited. My
No
dog
worries. I
agrees
love
with
dogs.
you.
I love dogs. It's interesting that today we do live in a world where that you're not usually, depending on where you live, you're usually not physically threatened because of your opinions, your views, or most importantly, your orientation to truth or
Right.
questioning the big questions. And yet there are major internal barriers, I think, to that actually, and ego barriers and things like and social
Well,
barriers.
financial
Yeah.
barriers. A lot of these people, like, I've interviewed neuroscientists who were the dean of neuroscience departments at major universities who literally would never come out with what they knew until after they retired because it would ruin their tenure. They would get, pushed to the side. So,
Yeah.
it's certainly. And I'm a big fan of science. I am
Mhm.
all for science, in this new world where everyone's got an opinion about, a lot of people become scientists these days, and I'm not even down with any of that. I'm really interested in real science, and there's
Mhm.
real science out there that we're just not getting access to because it doesn't fit the current materialistic paradigm. It kind of would
Sure.
go, it would shift the way that we operate financially, emotionally, our healthcare system, everything would have to change.
Yeah.
And change is hard, as you know, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to changing for money. Woo, that's even
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah. It's so interesting with the way you mentioned, that science can be approached in a more maybe a superficial way or with a sort of superficial understanding. But what's interesting is if you go into really deep understanding when it comes to science, specifically when you talk about quantum theory, quantum field theory, quantum chromodynamics, Heisenberg's
Hmm.
uncertainty principle, you get into a place where the more like the materialistic rigid mindset just flails, like it
Yeah,
literally can't go there. And
yeah.
this stuff's been around. Like I love the many worlds interpretation of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the Everett
Hmm.
interpretation. And this dude just wrote this paper in the 1950s and everyone just overlooked it. And now they're like looking, there more and more people are looking at it going, well, it actually makes a lot of sense. It mathematically works. Maybe there are literally many worlds and many dimensions here that are just branching off constantly and so forth. And to
Yeah.
me, things like that are totally fascinating. But you got
But
to
you
go
have
down. You
to
got to be willing to go
remember,
down the rabbit hole.
but you also have to remember that science has bias.
Hmm.
And, ultimately, the reality that we're existing in that's been this way for a very long time is a very controlled environment. And it goes
Hmm.
back to this idea that, well, what can we make money off of? What can we control? And, you talk to anybody that's studied quantum physics, and they're the first to tell you that, look, we know what we know right now, and it's all going to change. But
Hmm.
what's interesting is that those are true scientists. When I meet a true scientist who says, this is what we know right now, versus, somebody who's out there with an agenda who wants to make it fact and that's it, because there's something that they've got something to gain from that. Our
Yeah.
entire system is built on materialism, right? So
Hmm.
of course, I mean, I forget, I'm spacing on the scientist's name right now, and I should know this because it's in my series. There were scientists that, I forget his name now, who basically said, hey, you know what, docs, if we wash our hands, will not cause as many maternal deaths or serious infections with surgery. And they literally shunned him for
Yeah.
25 years. He like went crazy and died in an asylum. And then later people are like, wow, maybe that guy had an idea. That's but it went up against what the the mainstream, the powers that be. And that's kind of where we are right now, which I think is really cool. We're at this place where, Einstein's theories, people are starting to step back and go, wait, he was an amazing man, but maybe he didn't have it all right. And
Hmm.
one of the big things that we explore in the Galileo projects is this sort of like, what's next? Because we have materialism and we have, quantum physics, and everybody's looking for like the big theory of everything, they call it, right? The big,
Hmm.
Tom Campbell, who I interviewed, calls it the big toe, the big theory of everything. Everyone's trying to combine these two. And that's some of the research is pretty cool on how you do that, because the reality is, yes, in certain situations, normal mainstream physics works. This is a table, that's a thing behind me. Normal physics works in this level. But
Hmm.
what happens is, in materialism, everybody wants to go, okay, we're just not going to look over there. And if it's just wacky, don't worry about it. And now we're getting to this place, I think, where a lot more of the stuff is going to start to come out because we can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I am curious about your experience of um, producing What the Bleep Do We Know? Because that I think was somewhat pivotal in. Well, you can speak to this, but pivotal in bringing more interest in spirituality to sort of popular culture, to general interest. I guess maybe normalizing just the general interest in spirituality, consciousness, digging deeper into what we consider to be just true and accepted, but haven't really dug deep enough. And I love there was a quote in that line by the little kid with the basketball, and he just said, "The real question is how far down the rabbit hole are you willing to go?" And I love that. Anyway, so maybe you could speak a little bit about that. Oh, I think I lost your sound somehow.
I muted myself because my dog was going crazy, and I don't know why. He's usually pretty chill, but for whatever reason today, there's spirits or something in the room. I don't know. Um, Whatever. It is what it is. So, when I got hired to make What the Bleep, it wasn't even called What the Bleep. It was called Sacred Science. And I had never even, I don't think I could even spell quantum physics. I didn't know anything about it. I was a hired gun, hired to produce this other movie. And part of the way that it transformed into the film that it transformed, I think, was because so much of what they were talking about was always considered like these weird fringe, oh, those are just the weird people. It's not that any of the information that we brought forth in the Bleep was actually new. It was the way that we delivered it. We delivered it in a
Mhm.
very, like, we had Marlee Maitland, an Academy Award winning actress. We had a storyline. We made it super accessible for people, because the funny thing is, when the Bleep came out, I was referred to as the mouthpiece of Satan, crazy, like all sorts of stuff. Like, literally, I had to leave my house because people were trying to come there and murder us. Um, but
Oh my
what
God.
you look back now, and most of that movie is pretty behavioral science and neuroscience. It's like, oh yeah, that's all true, actually, because
Mhm.
the premise of that movie really said your thoughts affect your reality.
Mhm.
And then we showed how the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, the double slit experiment, this is ways in which science is saying how, the observer affects reality. Um, and the interesting thing is I think people, it's funny when Nike came out with that just do it, thing and their whole thing,
Yeah.
we were all kind of like, yeah, that's basically it. And Disney made a movie using basically stealing our entire concept of the cells, the little animated cell characters. Um,
Mm.
so slowly became mainstream, but yeah, Bleep was a catalyst for it because we really said, look, there's a great quote by Fritjof Capra. He says, science doesn't need mysticism. Mysticism doesn't need science, but man needs both. And so
Mm.
that was kind of where we were coming from, is that people that are deeply spiritual typically don't need the science behind it. And people that are very scientific aren't really all that interested in the spiritual side. But if you bring them together, you get a deeper understanding of how this reality works and how you can engage it in a way that's more beneficial for yourself. And Bleep was the first movie that was mainstream that made it funny and silly and had
Yeah.
an actress that just really said some of these basic things. And then of course it Bleep spawned an entire, industry, but that was it. It was really just, let's keep it simple. Let's say the basics of, like, look, your thoughts affect your reality. Here's just some ways we can show you that it does that. But at the end, that was really all we were saying.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Did you feel like, as you were producing or making that movie, did you feel like you were able to steer it in a certain way yourself? The reason I'm asking this is I watched a different interview with you, and you were kind of alluding to this, that at some point someone asked you, well, what do you think? How do you think we should do this? And that's what I was
Yeah.
interested in. What
Oh, sure. I'll
what were
tell you
those
that story.
questions? Yeah.
Sure. So, when I got hired to make What the Bleep, like I said, I was a movie producer. I hadn't even read a book on quantum physics. I did, ironically, start a few months earlier learning to meditate, which I'd never done before. Um, but I knew nothing. And so when I met Will, so there's three filmmakers on What the Bleep Do We Know. There's myself, William Arntz, and Mark Vicente. And Will is the financier. And the way I want to just set everybody up is, like, Will is the financier, but he's also a physicist. Like, that
Mm.
was what he was studied in school and did. Mark is a spiritual seeker, always on. So he's like science and woo woo, right? And then there was me kind of in between them that had no effing clue what the hell anybody was talking about most of the time. And so when Will sent me the script, and the script was really bad. I mean, Will even knows
Mm.
this to this day. It was like terrible. It was some script where they were gonna have these silly skits, Saturday Night Live like skits, and a host, and then they were gonna use. Will and Mark were a member of the Romp the School of Enlightenment. Romp the School of Enlightenment did not fund this movie. It had nothing to do with this movie. Will and Mark happened to meet there.
Mm.
That's the thing. Um, but one of the things that RSC did was bring in speakers, and so they had gotten access to the video footage of a lot of those speakers, and they were just going to use that. And when Will said to me, I said, I have this thing, even to this day, if I'm working with somebody, especially their money, I say, what are your expectations? Like, what do you think is going to happen here? Because I want to make sure that I can live up to, like, deliver. And he said, I want 1 million people to see this movie. And I said, yeah, dude, like 1 million people are not going to see this movie. It's just stupid. And he
Uh,
said, well, what would you do? And the first thing I said is, well, I would actually, this Bleep was made on the digital analog cusp. Some of your people are going to know what
mm.
that means. Some of them not. Meaning, we shot half this movie on 35 millimeter film.
Wow.
That was the back in the day. So we were on that cusp where everything was shifting to the new digital world that we existed. So I said to Will, if you try to take these video interviews and blow them up to the big screen, they're going to be just so blurred out because technology, it just wouldn't work. So we have to go
Okay.
re-interview people. So I was like, you can't use this footage. We have to go re-interview people. So it started with re-interviewing people, and it was funny because, sorry, I've got something in my eye. We used to have a joke, and I would say to them, because the movie was originally called Sacred Science, and I would say to everybody, what the do I know, but what does this have to do with me? Because they were always talking like above my head. Like, I didn't
Mhm.
understand like what any of this shit meant half the time. And I was just like, why do I care about any of this? Like, why does this matter? And so
Yeah.
the joke that we had this thing where we were editing room, and we put on the top a big banner that says, what the bleep does Betsy know, was the joke. And because that became a barometer for us.
Hmm.
It became, and then when we did interviews, Will would interview them, and then Mark would interview them, and then I would interview them last and be like, okay, what does this mean again? what are you talking about? Why do I care about any of this? So we had to, and I swear some of these scientists must have just wanted their heads to explode, because I was just like, who is this dumb
That's a
girl?
genius recipe, though. That's
I
genius,
think
actually.
it, it,
It
and it
totally makes,
wasn't
because
planned.
you want it to be relatable.
Right. Well, and if you watch What the Bleep, it's multi-layered film,
Hmm.
and you'll see, and everything is done in threes. Like, we were very scientific about this. Like, the concepts are repeated 3 times in 3 different ways. Like, it's very specific. There's 3 recaps in the whole movie where you go, okay, you just learned all this. Now we're going to, usually it's an Amanda dream or something, but it was all designed because we knew we had to take people on like a lesson of understanding, and they had to start here and then they had to end. And the very last line of the movie says, don't take our word for it, research it for yourself. But
Mm.
we had to take people on a journey. So it's multidimensional, so that people at different levels of understanding would be entertained, which I think is why it did so well. Because you could be a complete neophyte and have no idea what the heck is going on and watch that movie and walk away with some wisdom. Or you could be a physicist, and whether you agree or disagree, you still understood what was going on.
Yeah, I think that is really, really ingenious, actually. And I wondered a little bit watching it if that character in the movie is a little bit autobiographical, like how she was walking through the whole thing, and just, but it was really well done, and it has that feel of the hero journey, like it has
Yeah,
that
the heroes.
archetypal
Yeah,
feel to it.
totally.
The regular
Well, I mean,
person just
I am a
wandering through
writer.
life, but trying to sort it
Yeah.
out.
I mean,
Yeah.
everything is the hero's journey. I teach the hero's journey, but yeah, I mean, it is semi autobiographical to me. I did write the script with Will. Oop, I'm losing my headphone. I did write the script with Will, because what happened next is, after we did all the interviews, I convinced Will that we needed to get rid of the host
Hmm.
and write a story, because, like, we have to remember that as much as we all want to pretend that we're star seeds and alien beings and all these great things that we all are, we're actually all having a human experience. Like, this is what we're
Yeah.
doing here. This is the human experience. Okay. So the best way, why does story and myth transcend all culture? Why is it that if you look at humans, story and myths are what have always carried us forward? So storytelling is the greatest way to get information to someone.
Yeah.
If you give them a list of numbers, most people are going to go like, good night, right? If you give them a list of scientific information, their heads are going to explode. But if you tell them a story and you make them laugh and you make them cry and all those things, neurologically, you're getting into their heads, which is the best way to communicate. So that's why the story was so important to me, was because this is the best way to get the information across. Good teacher. My parents were both teachers, and my
Mm.
dad was a PhD in economics and a PhD in gerontology. Two of the driest things you could ever plan on, right? But but he always taught in this way that made it
Hmm.
interesting. So that's sort of,
Yeah.
for me, why the story was so important. And
That's
the
fascinating.
animations. I'm still doing it. I'm just did animations for this new series. Animations are another great way, but not boring animations. I want things to
Yeah.
be rich with color and art and beautiful
Hmm.
and stunning to look at, so that kind of takes you into a whole new world.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I watched this last night, by the way, and that was one of the things that stuck out. And I said, it's just, it was really the way, yeah, the animation aspect of it was like just another element. But when it appeared, I was like, yeah, it just works. So,
Thank
um,
you. Well, there's
what?
3 movies in there too. There's an animated
Yeah.
movie, there's a documentary, and there's a narrative
Yep.
story. And we, just
Yep.
like the multidimensionals, there's 3 layers to the whole film.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. It makes sense a lot. How that came about.
How was it
How did
watching it now? I'm just curious. How was it watching it now? Because if I watch it now and I cringe, because, like, remember that movie was made almost 20 years ago. How did
I
it
was
look
trying to
to you?
watch it through that lens, actually, because some things in pop culture change so quickly and so much that even like humor 20 years ago, some humor is still funny, some of it's not at all, but it was really funny
Right.
back then. This I think it aged reasonably well,
Good, thanks.
although the only thing I would say is like now it's almost as if each of those elements that were in there have been unpacked so much. Like spirituality's been unpacked in many ways.
Yeah.
Meditation's become completely,
Normal.
ubiquitous. Mindfulness
Mhm.
practices. I think the general public's understanding of science has probably deepened to some degree, maybe gotten distorted in other ways. But so it feels like perfect for that time frame is what it felt like to me, and I could
Yeah.
see it through that lens for sure.
Oh, good.
It's interesting if it were to come out now, it probably wouldn't have as much traction, I would think, and yet maybe
Well,
I don't know. Yeah,
it had to come out when it did. Like people always come to
yeah,
me and they say, "When are you going to make another Bleep?" And the Galileo Project is really the like if there was ever going to be a Bleep 2.0, it's the Galileo Project. And when you see the
mm,
Galileo Project, it's stunning. All the same elements are still true, but it's just done for today. But
yeah,
I do say, and I don't say this. This is I'm just repeating what many people have said, which is that Bleep was a catalyst
hmm,
for a massive paradigm shift. I mean, people walk around now and say, you create your reality like it's, but that started with what the Bleep, like that
yeah,
saying. I see it on billboards now, and I'm like, wow, nobody was saying that before it was said in what the Bleep, so
yeah,
I think there had to be something that would kick off this sort of next evolution of
yeah.
awareness. And people do say, here's a fun fact. On the same day that What the Bleep opened in theaters, Facebook launched,
Hmm.
and Massachusetts became the first state to legalize gay marriage. So if you
Wow.
think about the like what happened on February 4th, 2004, I'm super nerdy about I
Mhm.
always like to look back and like what happened in a day, and then how did that like unravel and unfold our storyline, because
Yeah,
we could always go in different directions. But that's a very interesting day, February 4th, 2004, because Facebook, talk about shifting the paradigm and changing and
yeah,
evolving humanity in a
everything.
way. And Bleep really did the same thing. And so did this opening up of our ability to
Hmm.
look at ways in which we interact with each other in relationship, and what we accept. So it was a pretty profound paradigm
Yeah.
shifting day for humanity. So, you know,
So it brings me to the question. So leading into the Galileo project, do you look at Bleep and say to yourself, okay, we did what we did there, but I still have unanswered questions, or I want to go deeper, or how are you led into starting the Galileo project, and what do you want to accomplish here that you didn't necessarily with that, or
well, the way that the Galileo Project is different is that I'm approaching the conversation and the Galileo Project from the idea that, hey, we know a lot. There's actually a lot that we do know that just nobody's hearing about because it goes up against the current powers that be. And
Mhm.
so, at the Bleep, we didn't have that. We didn't care. We're just like, we're going to say whatever we want, right? And
Mhm.
it was all pretty. I mean, it was all very scientifically accurate, except for maybe a couple things which I think are going to come out to be accurate, but there's people still question. Um, but I think what I wanted to do with the Galileo project is it started actually with COVID for me, because when COVID came out, everybody became armchair, you know, biologists and chemists, and everybody, like, the idea of science started to get degraded, and people were just like,
Yeah,
oh, scientists just say whatever. And while that's true, I can completely, I'm not pro-vax or anti-vax. I'm pretty much like, you do you, boo, kind of girl. Like, I'm all good with whatever choices people want to make. But I'm also like, I completely understand the fear that comes from the anti-vax world, because big pharma's a bunch of, excuse my mouth, I don't know if I could say fuckers, but they are, right? But there are these two sides are caught in this like low frequency battle that's not going to get anywhere, because
mm,
nobody's interested in actually having an evolved conversation. So
yeah,
for me, the Galileo project started with, I would like to go talk to legitimate, real scientists and have a really interesting, evolved conversation about what is possible and what do we know. And it's very grounded in science, but we've got some, we do a whole episode on, we call it, do humans have superhuman abilities, like psychic
mm,
abilities, telekinesis, energy healing, like all these things, right? That would normally be thrown out as like, those people are crazy. But there's literally years and years of legitimate studies done on
mhm.
all of this stuff. It's sort of like, how UFOs are coming out, and the
Yeah,
government's now saying, gee, we kind of had UFOs. Well, the same is going to be
right,
said for energy healing, telekinesis, psychic abilities. And the research is all just literally sitting there, and no one is bringing
mhm.
it to the forefront. So what I wanted to do is, I didn't want to talk to, wackadoodles and anybody like that. I wanted to go to, like, real scientists and say, okay, talk to me about the science behind Reiki healing. And there's white papers, there's just studies of hundreds
Yeah.
of people. And so I just really wanted to bring that out as a thing to say, hey, science isn't the problem. It might be people in science operating from this, capitalistic, materialistic perspective of greed.
Yeah.
That's true, but science
Sure.
isn't the bad guy. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where it all
Yeah.
started.
I'm with you. I mean, I'm a physician, so I'm really with you there. And of course, science has bias, and to be a good scientist, you have to understand bias and look for bias. But doesn't mean that it's nonsense. I mean, these are disciplines that have gone back hundreds and thousands of years,
Well,
essentially, and people spend their lives
like
dedicated to it.
like one of the things that we talk about, that we bring up in the Galileo Project, which I've always found hilarious, is if you go to certain scientists and you say Chinese medicine, I mean, even if you
Hmm.
Google Chinese medicine, what pops up is there is no scientific proof that Chinese medicine works. But there's literally 3,000 years of scientific proof that certain types of Chinese medicine work. It's just that
Yeah.
if people want to adhere to Chinese medicine, it goes against big pharma, so they're going to make it bad. So I
Yeah.
didn't want to get even into that battle. I do a little bit. I mean, I push up against, did you watch Ancient Apocalypse?
I did not.
Oh, it's really good. It's on Netflix. And what I liked about the way they handled this conversation as well was that, look, there's the mainstream and the narrative that they want to put out there. And then there's all this other stuff. And the mainstream
Hmm.
doesn't want all this other stuff to be talked about. So it's time for all this other stuff to be talked about. Like if we're really
Hmm.
interested in evolving as a species, if we're really interested in saving the planet, if we're really interested in all these things, then we have to address these things. And it's going to
Hmm.
require pushback, but it's going to work. The tit for tat crazy memes that are mostly scientific accurate but not entirely, that's not the way to have this conversation. So for me, the way to have the conversation was to go, okay, I'm going to present a series with very accurate science, with legitimate respected people in their fields, showing how energy healing works, how
Hmm.
psychic abilities work, how what are different ways in which we could define consciousness. Here's all this great research. So it was tried to be fun. Again, it's fun and funny. I do have a host this time, which is kind of funny because I didn't want one on the Bleep, but we have a great host for the Galileo Project. She's amazing. But it's fun, it's funny, it's got amazing, beautiful animations. But again, I think the difference, to go back to your original question, we're up-leveling the conversation that we started in the
Hmm.
Bleep, but it's not the same.
Awesome. And what format will this be in? Is this a movie or?
It's going to be a 5-part docuseries between 35 and 45 minutes per episode.
Cool. Very cool. And when's the time frame on it?
Well, I'm just finishing our first episode, and we're going to start going out to the platforms. We have some interest, I think, actually, because of Ancient Apocalypse doing so well on Netflix, that will help us a lot. Because one of the other things I've been up against for the last, even after the Bleep came out, was, well, there's not really an audience for that, or that's kind of fringe, or that's a little too
Hmm.
weird for us, or we can't say that because we'll piss off our sponsors, which are typically big pharma. So, I've been up against that, but slowly but surely, I think we've been proving that there is an audience for these kinds of conversations. And so I hope, the funny thing is, What the Bleep turns 20 next year.
Hmm.
And my intention is to have this come out in the fall of 2023 as a lead up to celebrating the Bleep.
I love it. I love it. So also you've published a book, what, a little over a year ago, maybe?
I did. I mean, I published a bunch of books, but I published the book
Yeah.
called Killing Buddha about a year ago. Yeah, actually.
Okay.
Wow. Maybe
Yeah.
more
And
than a year ago. I don't even remember.
it looked like it was about the same time I published mine. So about a year and a half or so, give or take.
Yeah. Okay.
And wasn't able to read all of it. Thank you for sending it to me. I wasn't able to read all of it. I read some of it. And first of all, it's really funny. I love
Thank you.
the just the approach, and I don't know if it's again autobiographical or whatever, but it has
is.
that way of just pulling you right into that character. You're like, oh yeah, I can see how this tells the story of so many people navigating the world of quote unquote pop spirituality or spirituality or whatever. I don't know if you want to speak about that book at all, or just to tell a story from
Sure.
it or something. But it's really fun, actually. It's quite a fun book
Oh,
story.
thank
Yeah.
you. It's actually, I mean, I've had lots of guys read it who I was surprised liked it because it's such a chick book. But
Mhm.
it is partially memoir. Yes, it's. I mean, I feel like the best place I can write from is from my own experience, so that's what I always do. But, you know, it's called Killing Buddha, and it's based on a very funny, very famous Zen koan. If you meet the Buddha if you meet the Buddha along the road, kill him, or you'll follow him the rest of your life. Which is this idea that we as humans get really attached to things, and then we think that's the thing, and then we put all of our energy into that thing, and then it turns out not to be the thing. We are the thing, right? It's our journey, our thing. And I kind of wanted to sort of put it in the narrative of my own experience of being awakened to a lot of these crazy things that people do in the name of getting enlightened, like walking on fire. And I didn't put any plant medicine in that particular book, but like all the things that we do, right? And
Mhm.
so that's the journey. It's really the story of this one character who gets sucked into a world that she doesn't know anything about, and then gets put in a van with all these different cast of characters, and everybody has to go on their own hero's journey, basically. And through the eyes of the things that we put ourselves through to think that we're going to be enlightened. And it's funny. I mean, people that have read the book said, you know, when you go and you see movies and they have a spiritual person, you could tell like the person who wrote that really has never had these experiences. So the
Yeah.
feedback that I get a lot is that, you know, because I do make fun of us, but I make fun of
Mhm.
myself mostly. But I do it in a way because when people read it, they go, oh, yeah, I can totally tell that you've done a firework. I can totally tell that you've, you know, done this or whatever other crazy things we were doing. Um, because it's on one hand, it's ridiculous that we need to walk on fire to be able to have some enlightened experience. Like, think of that for a second. Like,
Yeah.
I'm at the point in my life, I'm about to be 53. I've decided I'm no longer suffering to become enlightened. And I'm not going to
Mhm.
like walk. I mean, I've literally had arrows. I mean, like, I could tell you the crazy things that I've done in the name of awakening. And it's, on one hand, it's ridiculous and hilarious. And on the other hand, it's like, why are we humans making this so hard on ourselves? Like,
Mhm.
really, it's much easier than we think to find that place in yourself. So that's kind of what the book is about.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And yeah, I think sometimes highlighting the absurdity of the things humans get themselves up to is just such a good pointer, because what you said is exactly the deal. Is that I think we look for these superhuman situations because we think enlightenment is a superhuman thing, but it's not a superhuman thing. You have to go through your humanness to get, you know, to really see what's what, and it's truly an inward journey. It's not an
Well,
outward journey so much. Yeah.
I wrote a book. My very first book that I wrote was called Tipping Sacred Cows. And the first thing I did was like dissect the word enlightenment, because
Hmm.
everybody's talking about come to this course and you're going to get enlightened, come do this, meditate for 500 days in a cave and you'll be enlightened. And I was like, well, what really is enlightenment? Like,
Hmm.
really? And the whole word just means to know thyself. Like, that's
Hmm.
it. It actually doesn't mean ascending into the clouds and turning into a unicorn. It doesn't mean that, you know, all of a sudden you're a god. Like, it literally actually has nothing to do with any of that. If you go back and you really understand the term from just the etymology of the word, plus the different ways in which it was brought into culture, it just means to know thyself. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of
So
a bummer because I would like to just ascend and become a unicorn, but unfortunately, that's just not how it works.
right, right. We want that big spiritual cookie, you know, the
Right?
mind blowing mystical experiences, and you know, I think they
Yeah.
come on occasion, but it's not that's not the end result, and that's not the point, really. Yeah.
Well, you know, I know a lot of people, you know, I've done plant medicine. I don't know if you have, and those were amazing experiences, right? Like, I really did have some amazing
Hmm.
stuff. But the thing I think that used to frustrate me, it probably doesn't anymore because I don't care as much anymore, but I used to get frustrated when people would say things like, oh, transcend your meat packet, right? Get out of your body. Like, it's super easy actually to have an out of body experience. The trick is, can you have an
Yeah.
in body experience? So,
Hmm.
what do we do with all those mystical and amazing experiences? How do we integrate them in a way that creates a better world for myself and the people around me and everyone? Like, that's the real trick, because you're having a human experience. So you can pretend I'm going to transcend my human experience. But then when you wake up and you take your garbage out, you're still having the human experience. So there's no
Yeah.
getting out of it. So for me, the question is, what wisdom can I bring it back from those amazing experiences that I can use in my life in a way that creates better peace, better abundance, better health, whatever it might be, because I'm having a human experience. Until I die,
Yeah.
this is what I keep coming back here,
Yeah.
you know?
I'm with you. I mean, I've always felt that way when it comes to spirituality and all of it, awakening Buddhism. Not that I discount any of it, but that for me at least, my instinct was it always has to come back to life as it is, without trying to turn it into something it's not. But maybe seeing deeper into it, seeing deeper into emotion, deeper into thought, deeper into the experience of being a human, and it's amazing what's revealed there, actually. But yeah, I agree that the idea of just trying to like not be here anymore, be out of the body permanently or something, is probably sort of wrong direction. It tends to lead to dissociation, or
Yeah. Well,
whatever.
and denial, because
Yeah.
you can live in your I'm a spiritual goddess and here's my flowy whatever, and or whatever, warrior, all those labels and stories that we like to tell ourselves about what our spirituality is. They're all
Hmm.
just stories that we've made up. Like everything is a made up story here. Like the whole place is
Hmm.
friggin' made up, right? So we just keep needing stories to make ourselves feel better about our human
Hmm.
experience. So, masculine, feminine, goddess, warrior, like to me, I'm all of those things all the time, or not all the time. Sometimes I'm an asshole, sometimes
Hmm.
I'm amazing. I mean, this is the human experience. The question is, what am I going to learn from this, and how do I take it forward? And then if I die and I come back, hopefully, the only thing I would like to try to do is bring some of it back next time, but I might not
Hmm.
get to. I might not even come back. Who knows? Like the thing that's so funny to me about people is everybody wants to know, because knowing makes you safe, right? So
Right.
everyone wants to just be right, right? For
Hmm.
all I know, there is a dude sitting up in the sky, like making this whole thing happen. And I'm wrong. I mean, who am I to say that that is
Hmm.
wrong? I don't know. I don't know are three really powerful words. So when people come at me with their idea about religion or their idea about science, I just go like, okay, it's all possible. It's
Hmm.
all possible, because truth is subjective. Fact is becoming subjective. It used to be true, but
Yeah.
but but the thing that I do understand is that nothing ever stays the same, and that the minute
Hmm.
I say I know this to be true, I'm sure to get a nice hard kick in the ass to prove that, oh yeah, let me show you how it's not. So I kind of I there's at the end of the bleep, there's Marley's walking around and she's got this sign that says "Make known the unknown," and excuse me, to me, like, that's what I'm here to do. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. And I probably tomorrow it'll be different. Because that's just
Hmm.
when you get into that place of like being allowing of that, life actually becomes way more fun, because you just
Yeah.
kind of sit back and you're like, the memes, I didn't have that on my bingo card. Like, I love those, because it's like, I just sit back every day and I'm like, wow, that's cool,
Yeah. Yeah. So, or what if the hokey pokey really is what it's all about?
that one might be true, because the hokey pokey, you got to do a lot of moving. It's so much fun when you operate from that place. I mean, that doesn't mean that life doesn't suck sometimes and things are
Yeah.
hard for me, but I do have and the older I get, I have a much deeper willingness to wink at the world, even when I'm upset. Like I'm in the middle of this series and it's massive, and I'm trying to deliver stuff, and there's so much going on, and things are happening, and stress is going on about this or my kids or what, like life is occurring, and it makes me
Yeah.
feel, because I'm human. um but I also sometimes have to step back and go, well, that was an adventure, because that's really what we're here doing, like,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about the I don't know. That's actually a very potent and often overlooked phrase that goes
Yeah.
deeply into Buddhism. There's a very famous exchange including that involved Bodhidharma, who brought Buddhism from India to China, and is a very pivotal figure in Buddhism. And there was an emperor who asked him a question, basically asking him, "Who are you?" Or, who's this that came before me, sort of thing. And he just said, "I don't know." And it's a
Yeah.
very powerful thing, and it goes very deep. And I look at it as you could almost say like the feminine aspect, perhaps, or something. But it's a willingness to go into the unknown, a willingness to go into the cave, to go into the shadow, like that willingness and then realizing, wow, like much of life is actually already unknown. There's that, and that brings that mystery to everything. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and it makes it more fun. I mean,
Hmm.
it's so much. I think people, I mean, I know that there was a time in my life when I needed to be right, because being right and knowing makes you feel safe and grounded. And
Yeah.
it's super uncomfortable to feel unsafe and ungrounded. But, as I've been doing this series, I raised two kids by myself. I am constant. My friends are always like, Betsy, you are always like way out on a ledge somewhere, like about to do some crazy thing, but you always do it. And I figured, well,
Hmm.
why not? Like, why not do it? I said I was going to make a doc series. A year later, we're almost finished with the doc series. I said I was going to write a book. Like, to me, this is what I'm here to do,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes I have plenty of money. Sometimes I'm like broke as fuck. But either way, like, I'm just here. I'm like, I'm just going to like have an adventure
Yeah.
and try things. And it's super hard because we got into my dad gave me the art of war when I was 8 years old, and he
Wow.
said, read this book. This is how it works here. You have to get out of this. You can't fall victim to the mind games that they're going to play on you.
Yeah.
And so I'm lucky that that happened to me, because that's set me up to not worry so much about the definition of success, to not worry
Yeah.
so much when I fail. Yes, I feel shitty when I fail. Yes, I'm bummed, but I'm not, it's not soul crushing. It's more like I cry for an hour and then I go, okay, well, what did I learn? And what can I take forward into the next crazy thing I'm going to do? Because that's what
Yeah.
we're here for. And I see right now, especially after COVID, that a lot of people are starting to wake up to that idea. They're starting to wake up to go, wait, I don't have to play the game. I can make up my own game. What? Nobody
Yeah.
told me that. So part of what I want to do, and my mission with the Galileo Project, with Killing Buddha, with any of the projects, is I just want to push people towards the notion of like, hey, you don't have to play that game. There's a whole other thing going on over here. It's super cool. You might want to check it out. And
Yeah.
and that's sort of my
Yeah.
purpose.
I love it. So I don't know a lot about movie making and business and so forth, but it strikes me talking to you that you really have the heart of an artist. You think like an
Yeah.
artist, you move like an artist, you're an artist. And I guess I wouldn't have thought a producer. I'd say it's little I know, but how a producer is that artistic. I would have thought it was more that was the money person or the whatever. But
Well, the
I guess
money
I don't
person is
know
the money
what a
person.
producer is.
But
Yeah.
I'm also a director. And yes,
Yeah.
I have the skills. I was a line producer for 20 years. Line producers are the ones that spend the money and they have the little check boxes and they organize things. I am very
Okay.
overly organized and anal retentive. But yes, in my heart, I'm a creative. I'm a
Hmm.
storyteller and an artist. And that's why I'm producer, writer, director. Like even on the Bleep, I'm producer, writer, director. Because,
Gotcha.
there's different roles that need to be managed. And uh, you know, I think each one of them is creative, by the way. This
Hmm.
notion that creativity only relates to people that make paintings or write
Yeah.
music, I think is incorrect. A producer has to hear a director's vision of, I want to film this scene on the top of the Empire State Building and I want it to look like this and do this. And then the producer's the one that's got to figure out if they can get the Empire State Building or if they have to shoot it on a green screen or if what, like, so it actually is, they're all creative positions.
Yeah.
It's just, and by the way, filmmaking is a collaborative art.
Yeah.
You know, filmmaking is not done in a vacuum, and very rarely is it done by only one person. If you watch a good movie, there was an art director, there was a cinematographer, there was a makeup and hair person, there was a production assistant who brought coffee so that the makeup and hair person, you know, it's a very,
Yeah.
and that's how my team works. Like, we were laughing the other day, we went out for, like, we all went to David Buster's for a Christmas holiday, and by all I mean 7 of us. And I was joking because we took this picture, and I was laughing because I had seen some doc series I was watching, and the credit roll was like 600 people, right? It went on
Hmm.
for like 5 minutes, just the credits. And I laughed and I said, wow, our credit roll is going to go on for like 4 seconds because it's literally just us people. And I do like to keep my team small, but um, we all, and I was joking, my producing partner, you know, she's editor, producer, and accountant, right? And
Mm.
then I'm lawyer, you know, but we still have a creative team, and we all just sort of jump in and do everything. And that, I think that's part of what people don't understand. They think that there's these boxes. It's like filmmaking is a collaborative art, and everybody that's involved in it is an artist.
You know, I can tell you since I started making YouTube videos like a year and a half
Mhm.
ago and doing the editing specifically, I'm so much more aware when I watch a movie that a movie that's a really good movie, it's not just because the actors are good. It's not just because the writer's good. It's not just because the director's good. It's literally everything. It's the
Yeah.
sets. And especially the editing. If you don't have
Oh
a good
yeah.
editor, it doesn't matter if everything else is great. It's going to be
Right.
garbage. And it really gave me that sense of what you just said. That man, so much depth to a good production.
Well, and start watching, like, I used to teach filmmaking and documentary filmmaking, and I think I always even used to give my documentary filmmakers a hard time because I would say, you know, just because you're doing an interview doesn't mean that you don't want to look at what's going on behind them. What's the environment like? What's the color like? Is it bright?
Mhm.
So if you watch like the Galileo Project, like in every scene there's I forget. Oh my God, my brain is so tired. The little ancillary globe thingy that Galileo made. Like, I have
Mhm.
little things all around the set that you probably won't notice, but some people's going to
Mhm.
look back and go, "That's so weird." In this guy's house, they have this globe, but wait, it's also over there because I carry it around with me
Mhm.
wherever I go, and I just hide it in the background. And then in all the animations, like, my animator is so amazing because we have all these different worlds that we're building. But I put like Schrodinger's cat. My cat is a picture on like every wall, and then we have Pavlov's dog. But most people will never
Love it.
understand that. But some people will be like, "Oh, they're making reference to Schrodinger's cat all the way through this." And no, it's just like these hidden, like, modern day people call them Easter eggs, right? But to me,
Yeah.
it's just subliminal filmmaking because
Mhm.
filmmaking is in a film watching, even though there's a wall between you, technically speaking. If a good film has happened, it's immersive, and you've
Yeah.
been brought into the world. So to me, that's important. Just as important as, are they framed properly? And, you know, it's all the little things. And in documentary, we have a little bit less control over that, but I still think it's important that, you know, when you go back and you watch the Bleep, here's a funny thing. You know, the little ships,
Yeah.
the Santa Maria. So they're on sets all over the movie. I put them in
Mm.
different scenes, just little replicas of the ships. But most people don't notice that, but some people do. In Amanda's apartment, there are photographs on the wall of every
Uh-huh.
scientist we interviewed in the movie.
Whoa. Okay. So I'm gonna have to watch this again. Yeah. I want to look
So
for all those
I
details.
I'm
Yeah.
a nerd about that kind of stuff because, and you
Hmm.
might barely be able to see it. I don't even remember if you
Hmm.
can see all of that stuff, but I put it there because I
Yeah.
thought, if somebody gets taken out of the moment of the forefront and they look to the left, I want them to be able to have that drive them back to the forefront, not
Yeah.
have them,
Yeah.
you know, that's the film, that's filmmaking.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. You never know what little element's gonna like really resonate or be the catalyst for you. You know, I
Yeah.
love that level of
Well,
detail.
music
Uh,
is the, you know, just watch a movie without music. Try watching a movie
oh,
without
right.
music.
Yeah.
A whole different
I've
movie.
I,
You'll be like, wow, this is terrible. What this movie is, these
yeah.
people are
I've seen
awful.
those like. Yeah, I've seen the like scenes of a suspenseful horror movie that you're familiar with no
Hmm.
sound, with no background
Yeah.
music, and it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing
It
how
makes no
powerful
sense.
music
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a couple well, so to lead into the questions, I obviously my site I talk about awakening, very directly and so forth, but I find that outside of direct pointing and practices and inquiry and so forth. The area of life that really transmits what I think is sort of living truth really is art. And I just I love artists of all different types and this artistic expression. It just comes through. It doesn't matter who you are, or what you are, or how you got up, or how you're going to bed, but somehow the artist or the team of artists has a way of literally just becoming transparent and letting something shine through that's powerful and transmitting and affects people. I love it. So what would you, if you had advice for somebody, because you had a lot of experience in this industry, if you have advice for somebody who's interested in filmmaking, because I know actually can think of several friends that starting out and so forth, interested in filmmaking and looking at the sort of landscape of how things are to this day and age, but just in general, their heart's in it. What kind of advice would you give them if you could just, give yourself advice 30 years ago or whatever?
Okay, so I'm going to say two things. The easy answer is I wrote a book called The Documentary Filmmaking Masterclass, which really goes into all of this. It's not just about documentaries. It really translates actually to any widget, anything that you want to create. I call those widgets. So documentary, film, makeup line, YouTube series. It's like the process of creation is the same. There's also a really cool book by a guy named Barnett Bain, and I'm going to think of the name of it, but look up Barnett Bain. He was the producer on What Dreams May Come. He wrote a really great book. He wrote a really great book on creativity. But here's the thing the way I work is that I do not think the things that I'm creating are mine. I am just the messenger. Right. So like for me, this is a big concept, but like we're all connected to consciousness. We are consciousness. We're a reflection of consciousness. Right. So this is the way I just did interviews with scientists that explain this beautifully. When you watch the Galileo, you'll see it. But it's essentially like we're all tapped into this beautiful dream that's occurring. Right. And we all have these cool skill sets and things that we're all good at, and I'm good at this and you're good at that. And so what I'm really good at is like I hate the word download because I think it's overused now, but what happens is I just simply, Betsy, get a message. Okay, Betsy, you're going to do this. You're going to write this book now. Okay. And then I just get out of its way and I just listen. And what happens is, have you ever heard of the concept of a tulpa?
I don't think I have.
So tulpa, I think it's Hindu. It's a thought form brought into reality. So there's these great books by this guy named Alvin Schwartz, and he's passed, and he was one of the original writers of the Batman and Superman comics way back in like the 1940s. And he wrote these incredible books that he says are true. God bless him. And one of them was he introduces this concept of a tulpa because what he realized he has done is he actually made a Superman and he dreamt them so much that he brought them out into the world. So all we are is dreamers, right? We're bringing out dreams into reality. Like the guy that figured out the rocket, he's a dreamer. He's dreaming it. So that's what we're all doing. So for me, I realized that any creative project that I'm spearheading, because that's my skill. I get things done. I make things happen. I'm good at pulling people together. I'm good at having ideas, but my skill is that it's not me. I'm just its sort of like guide here, and it's its own entity. It's its own tulpa living out in the world. And so when that's part of like when I put a book out, I don't worry about whether it's going to be New York. I would like it to be, but if it is, great. If it isn't, great. All I'm here to do is take the information and put it out in the best of my ability that I can. And if you can do that, and you can just like spend a lot of time in meditation. I spend a lot of time like listening, to the world and the messages that are coming to me, and knowing like, oh, wait a minute, this keeps happening. This must be for this. And that's how I interact with the creative source, is that I understand that I'm a little beacon that pops in, and I'm supposed to spit it out because I'm having the human experience. I'm at this lower frequency. If you think of frequencies, we're at the slowest frequency. So in order for creativity and dreams to come out, they have to come out through something. So they're coming out through me or through you or through whoever else.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense. It might have been weird.
Totally.
But...
Oh no, I felt it. Yeah. It makes 100% sense to me. Yeah, it's like you're in a sense you're shepherding it, you're facilitating it, but you're not the source of it necessarily, and you're also not it's not for you. I love that. It's it's a surrendered way of living, and
Yeah.
honoring the art itself, honoring the art to come into form in the way it needs to, and so forth. So
Yeah. And
that's
it's
really awesome.
also in the beginning of the book, one of the things I say to people is like, I mean, first of all, you're here. You might as well do it, right?
Hmm.
Fuck it, do it. Why
Yeah,
not? What, like, nothing
yeah.
like this idea that if you do it, everything in your life is going to fall apart. If you do it and everything in your life falls apart, but you're loving it, then your life is supposed to fall apart anyway. That's just the way it works. But the other thing is that this notion that everything is, if you're following your path, it will all be easy and things will just magically come to you. No, I got to tell you, when you step out into the world to do something bigger than you've
Hmm.
ever done before, every possible challenge that could show up will. And that's part of the journey. And so for me, I don't make a movie or write a book for the end result. Whatever the end result is whatever the end result is. I do it because I know I'm going to have some wild ass adventure. I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff. I'm going to get taken to my knees probably 100 times. I'm going to want to quit and walk away. All of those things. And the test really is, can I get through these and what can I carry through that? What can I learn from all that?
I love it. Courage. I
That's
mean,
the fun
that's
of
really,
life.
yeah, yeah. And courage, courage is there's no courage without the fear. There's no courage without the unknown and the challenges that come along with this. But obviously, you give yourself to this, and that's wonderful. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I do.
beautiful. Very nice
I mean,
way to live.
I just did the funnest thing on Instagram. You get to do that 1 year recap,
Oh
of
yeah.
your life in like 1 second. So I made one just for fun and I looked back and I was like, man, I've had so much fun. I went to Italy, I did all this stuff, and it all sounds all like, sure, she could do that. I'm just going to tell everybody right now, no, I created it. There is no
Hmm.
$1 million, $5 million, benefactor saying, here, Betsy, I have to sort of generate. And,
Yeah.
and, and when you say, I'm going to generate what I want in my life, and you start taking the actions to do that, it's going to be hard, but it's going to be fun. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
I think you just made a really important distinction. The topic of what law of attraction, that sort of thing, is. In your other interview, you said you can't just decide to shit out a Lexus or something like that. But
Right.
the
Pretty
point
much.
you just made is the key, and that is you got to work at it. You actually have to
Yeah.
be willing to do the work. Yeah, it's great to be creative and brainstorm and think and all this stuff, but once you know which direction you want to go, like you have to do the work too. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to, you know, put in the hours, put in the effort, make the connection, all the things you need to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and again, it's like what I said is, if you can meditate all you want about wanting a Mercedes, but if you also haven't done the work to go, well, what does the Mercedes represent for me?
Hmm.
Why do I want a Mercedes in this reality? What does it represent to me? And what are ways that I could get that experience without having the Mercedes? Because the minute you let go of for me, I was talking to my business partner on another project today, and we were talking about some funding that might come in, and we were both kind of like, wow, that's weird. Like we had never, like, it's coming in from over here. And we both said,
Hmm.
it's like, isn't that always how it is? When you let go of holding on so tightly, do I have to have the Mercedes if I have the Mercedes, then I'm successful, versus I would like to experience success that's
Hmm.
defined by this current paradigm's version of success. Then you look around and you're like, wow, I have a lot of success. Then you can say, oh, I don't really want the Mercedes. And then usually you get the Mercedes. But if you sit back and say, the only way that I'm going to feel like I've accomplished something is to have the Mercedes, chances are you're either going to get the Mercedes and your life is going to be miserable, or you're never going to get the Mercedes.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's important to look at what we use surrogates for. So if you want, exactly, even if you want the perfect partner, why? What do you think it's going to give you? What are you really looking for? Are you looking for peace? Are you looking for the ability to express yourself naturally and authentically? Like go directly to what it is that actually moves you, and just keep
Yeah,
digging in, and that's how you have a life that feels authentic, and it feels,
exactly.
congruent with your deeper truth and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, check in on what your values and ethics are. I think a lot of people don't really know what their values and ethics are, and it's important. Like, if your value is, I want to be rich, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. People that go, oh, all they care about is money, good for them. That's what their values are. That's okay. Let's stop judging it.
Yeah.
But if their values are, I want to be rich and control humanity and be an evil person, okay, I might not like that. But there's nothing wrong with someone saying, I want to be rich.
Hmm.
Awesome. That is their values. Now, what are your ethics around that? And then when you operate in your values and ethics without worrying what other people are judging you, generally your life feels better and you get more of what you want.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah. And just unpacking what things mean. If you say to yourself, I want to be rich, and like, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to be rich without just, a huge bank account with nothing else going on in your life or something like that. But yeah.
Right. But if you've done the work, you can say, I would like to have the millions of dollars in the bank, and that's okay too. And,
Hmm.
I would like to have millions of dollars in the bank because, yes, life is easier when you have millions of dollars, and I could do better for the planet, and I could do this with it, and I could do that with that. Sure. I think,
Yeah.
again, we get really judgmental about what people want. And part of what we have to start doing as a civilization is letting go of our own opinions about what other people like and want.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
I want to be
Well,
rich.
I think yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
wouldn't mind it at this point. I'll take a couple million in the bank.
Yeah. My guess
So
is you would have it earmarked for another project and another project and another project, but that's just my guess.
maybe I would take a good vacation though first. I
Yeah.
would do that.
Sounds like you deserve it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So I look forward to seeing the Galileo Project, and
Thank you.
thank you so much for your time with me. I'm sure people are going to get a ton out of this, and thanks for going into a little bit about your profession, actually, and because I know a good handful of people, and I'm sure many will watch this that are like interested in this, movie making and production directing, and don't really know how to start or would love some
I
advice from
understand.
somebody who's walked the path. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, it was really fun, and
Thanks.
thanks to Joe because she's going to watch this as well, and she's your
I
friend,
know,
the mutual
Joe.
friend that got us connected. Joe, yeah. So,
She's a rock star.
all
We
right,
love her.
she said
Bye.
the same about you. Bye. Thank
Aw.
you.
Bye.